Welcome back. Spring is typically a busy season for housing markets, including the market right here in Toronto. But our next guest says for the fourth consecutive month, sales of detached homes are at their lowest level in this city in 30 years. That's aside from the COVID lockdown period. And condo sales are at their lowest level in 20 years. Let's bring in John Pasalis. He's president of Realosophy Realty. John, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on in the Toronto housing market?
The spring market is officially dead on arrival, unfortunately. Very sluggish sales. As I said, as you introduced, we've been seeing this for the past few months. And really, this is not a real estate story. It's a story about the broader economy, economic conditions worsening, and more importantly, people worried about their job losses. No one's rushing out to buy a home if they're worried they're going to lose their job, and many buyers are just moving to the sidelines right now.
What's this tell us? This tells us that participants or potential participants in the real estate market read the headlines. They're aware of economic conditions. They're aware of what's going on in the world.
They do, absolutely. They read the headlines and they see what's going on south of the border. And of course, the biggest negative side effect of what we're seeing from the U.S. administration is the uncertainty. It is just not knowing what's going to come next, what tariffs will drop next, and how that might impact a particular household's income.
Do you see any shifts in sentiment as the headlines from Washington change? As we know, Donald Trump has reversed himself or partially reversed himself several times.
I mean, that's the challenge. They keep reversing and going back and forth, and I think this is leading to the uncertainty. So I don't see this really much of a change in the housing market anytime soon. I think we need to see things stabilize. We need to see some green shoots coming out of the economy, some stability, and things calming down in terms of the rhetoric south of the border.
So what does this mean to prices when the market more or less freezes up and sales almost evaporate?
So prices are actually down about 6-7% year over year, but this is largely because we saw a slight rally last spring. If we look at prices over the past 9 months for houses and condos, they've been relatively stable. And this is largely because sellers are stubborn. Home prices can shoot up 20% in a short period of time, but they tend to be sticky on the way down. So sellers are holding out. So we're not seeing a ton of downward pressure on prices yet.
What happens in the case of somebody who must sell? They've got a situation, a family situation, a work situation in which they simply must sell their home.
I think that's the one risk, and especially if we start to see more job losses in the months ahead, that is one thing that could trigger some sellers needing to sell, reducing their prices. And of course, we don't need a ton of sellers to do that. Once a handful of sellers start dropping their prices, they now set the market.
Right. Let's talk about the condo market. There seems to be all kinds of negative headlines on the condo market. Is this a good time to buy a condo?
That's a great question. I mean, listen, the market is sluggish. If you're buying a larger unit, I'd say the market is more stable. Condos in the 900 to 1,000 square feet that target end users. We're seeing a lot more stability. The micro condos.
So what does stability mean?
They're just moving more quickly. We're not seeing as much downward pressure on prices. The small condos is the market that is the most sluggish. Those are really investor driven and have a ton of inventory and very few showings.
Right, and so are not selling.
They're not exactly. Those are the ones that aren't moving.
And what is happening to prices in that segment?
We're starting to see a little bit of dip in prices. We got not significant, not meaningful. We're not seeing 10% year-over-year declines yet. We're seeing a bit of stability still. So
to rephrase my question, is this a good time for, let's say, a young person or a young couple getting into the real estate market for the first time to buy a smallish condo?
I would be cautious if you're buying a small condo. I think I'd have less concerns if you're buying a larger unit. I think you need to be mindful of the building you're buying in. Mm-hmm. A lot of these buildings that were targeted to investors that have hundreds of micro condos probably are not going to be the best investment. If you're buying in a boutique building, probably a little bit safer.
Right. So your concern would be that young couple or person could buy a small condo and see its value
decline.
Decrease.
Exactly, because we're seeing a lot of risk over the next 6 months or so.
Okay, let's pivot to the big national story and Mark Carney's pledge to get the government back into the business of building homes. We ran pieces yesterday about prefabricated homes being made in New Brunswick. He is pledging to build homes at a pace not seen in many, many decades. What are some of the challenges do you think he will face, and can he succeed in meaningfully increasing housing supply in this country?
I mean, it's yet to be seen. Certainly not at the pace that they're suggesting. And I think one of the government's big goals is to prioritize non-market housing. So that is either not-for-profits or government subsidized, which of course is important. That is a segment that governments have largely ignored since the early 90s. I think that's a great goal. It doesn't help solve the housing affordability crisis if someone wants to buy, a home that they're going to own or occupy. So while it's positive on the one side, it's not necessarily going to help people who want to buy a home of their own.
John, thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks for having me.
John Pasalis, president of Realosophy Realty.